Hi, and welcome back to the Mob Mentality Show. I'm Chris Lucian, and my co-host is Austin Chadwick. And today we have Doc Norton here with us to talk about knowing the problem you're solving, making your work visible, working together, creating simple things in small steps, being meticulous about composition, validating before, during, and after, releasing ridiculously often, and favor automation over documentation. So, but first, before we get into all of those things, which I could probably
Yeah,
talk about an hour about each topic, Doc, can you introduce yourself and kind of get us into it?
yeah. So, Doc Norton, I've been in software product development honestly, for 40 years, professionally 35, professional being getting actually paid versus volunteering labor to someone. Um, and I guess I'm going to say I've been an agilist or whatever you want to call it these days since a little bit before 1999. Now, 99 was when I picked up the XP Explained book and realized that I actually had a tribe. But I was experimenting with a lot of this stuff even before I read about it. So, um, yeah, it's been a passion of mine for a number of years.
Awesome. Well, yeah, let's just jump in and we can kind of have a meandering conversation here. So,
Perfect.
knowing the problem you're solving, what were you thinking there? Maybe we can jump.
Yeah, yeah. So, just a quick backdrop, right? You guys contacted me and asked about, what topic might I want to cover, and I have a framework or whatever you want to call it of basically 8 behaviors that I think every team should be displaying. And so we said, well, let's just kind of talk through those, maybe focus on a few of them. They're in a particular order. I won't necessarily get into reasons why everyone is in the exact order that it is. But know the problem that you're solving is the number one thing for me. And one of the reasons, honestly, is that a lot of organizations that I go into, the team is so removed from the business, is so removed from what is the outcome that we're after, what are we trying to accomplish, that other than does it meet the specification, which of course requires a very detailed specification, the team has no idea if they're actually doing a good job and having a positive impact. So one of the first things that I do going into orgs is I'll talk to them about, like, look, the team has got to know the problem that they're trying to solve. What's the outcome that they're after? And oftentimes, this is an adjustment for organizations, for many, not for all. But when it starts to happen, they start to discover things like, oh, there are other ways we could actually solve this problem. There are faster ways, there are simpler ways, there are more effective ways, more cost-effective ways, whatever that might be. And so it turns out it's super beneficial to have the team focused on a particular problem. This kind of lines up with something else that I tend to do, which in a small organization, this isn't really relevant, but in a larger organization, I try to align the teams towards like domains or areas of business focus so that they can start to become more specialized in the sets of problems that area kind of brings to them, or that area kind of lends itself towards, right? They start thinking more about who are our personas, and those types of things that help them think about the problem.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is I don't know. I really like Chris perfectly understanding the customer and everything, and then telling me exactly what to do. Like, I'm just a code monkey, Doc, and I just produce code, and it's Chris's job just to hand me exactly what I'm supposed to do. If
Right.
it's anything other than code, why? Well, I'm a coder, right? I'm a programmer,
Yeah, yeah. So it's interesting. I have this sort of there's 2 archetypes of developer.
Yes.
There's 2 archetypes of anything if you want to make them up. But for developer, the ones that I see very often is you are either a builder or you are a problem solver. Now, the truth is that most of us that do some kind of development are a mix of both of those things, but there's one that we lean more towards, right? I'm more inspired by solving a problem. I'm more inspired by building a thing. And Austin, I know you're being a little tongue in cheek with this, but there are absolutely people within organizations who will say that and sincerely mean it. They will say, hey, look, it's not my job to understand the business. It's not my job to do, like, You bring me the specifications, I build the thing to spec. That's what I'm here for. And in some organizations, that's totally true. And it's
Right.
probably fine. And I hope that what you're doing is, I don't know, fine tuning an accounting system, or, adjusting a legal docketing system, something that's like very clear and obvious, and no discovery is necessary and no creativity is necessary. If you're, on the other hand, you're in an organization where we're trying to figure out, either do we have product market fit at all, or where can we expand into the same market or other markets, you need that creativity. And the developer that just wants specs to sling code, it's probably not a good fit.
Yeah. And I've seen that before. And something jumped out to me what you were saying when you said when the team knows the problem to solve, they might come up with a different way to solve it that is more lean or better, or might have some other benefits. And I have kind of two quick stories to tell on that. Like, one is where we did that. We sat with the customer or business person, really got to the bottom of the problem they're trying to solve. We explored like 10 different technical solutions, and then we picked the one that was the least amount of work that gave the most value, basically, so we can get it to market faster. And in that case, they loved it. In another case, the business person did not love it because they really had their mind fixed on a particular technical solution.
Yep.
Have you ever encountered this?
Yeah, I have. So I think one in some instances, one of the key drivers behind the I don't like that approach. I don't like the small steps approach. Or it has, in my mind, has a lot to do with this long-term indoctrination into environments where I get nothing. Now it's my turn. And I have to ask for everything I want right now because it's my one shot to get it.
Right.
And once the focus is off of me, I don't get anything anymore. And so I am like, if that's where I come from, even if that's not the environment I'm in now, but it's the environment that I basically grew up in, then my mentality is I got to have all the things, and they've got to be exactly like this. And I got to have them in this first shot because there is no other shot. And I find that when people start to recognize, get acclimated to the idea of like, all right, we can do a small thing. We can see how that goes. We can learn from it. We can adapt. We can keep going. That they oftentimes back off from but it must be this exact way. Honestly, another way that I see that manifest is, it's a fairly broad category, but I'm just going to call it hubris-driven development. And it is someone in a position of authority has an idea, and because they have the idea, it's good. And so it just needs to happen. Or I did this at company XYZ and it was spectacular, therefore I know it will work. And one of the things that we know about complex environments, emergence, acceptation, is that you can repeat the exact same steps in the exact same way, in the exact same order, and you will get a different result. Right? There is no shortcut that involves us not learning while we go along.
Right. Well, yeah. So kind of speaking to learning as we go along, how about making your work visible? Are we, is this like invite the manager in so they can watch you work, or is this something different to spin off of Austin's?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I suppose it could be. That all depends on the trust in the environment, right? As a in some cases, in some organizations, as a senior executive, as the head of, as the CX, whatever, as the I've joined the ensemble, right? I'm right there slinging code with them, and the fact that they're working together allows me to be able to do that much easier. But make the work visible. There's really kind of, from my perspective, there's two dimensions to this. The first, which I think is what most people think about, is just clarifying like what's upcoming, what's in progress, what's recently completed, right? Whatever your kind of your flow is, make that visible. I've got some preferences there. I like to actually use, I like to start with a opportunity solution tree or a problem tree, which then leads to a story map, which then leads to some kind of a lightweight backlog sort of thing. And so you can kind of see the progression of the work. But there's a lot of advantage to doing that. You can look at your throughput, you can look at your lead time, you can look at your cycle time. There's a bunch of different things that you can look at just around like, how are we doing? What's the flow? It helps to answer a lot of questions for folks around like what's going on, what's next. And you don't have to field nearly as much stuff if you make that really visible. And I kind of lean into it a little bit. The other aspect is actually monitoring your flow, right? Like make how you work visible. Where are your wait states? Where are any of your cues? Where does stuff tend to slow down? What are the activities you're engaged in? And making that visible to the team can really help them identify opportunities for improvement. It can lead to more deep conversations in a retrospective. One of the flaws of many retrospectives is we skip the whole data gathering part. And we just go from problem to discussion, and we skip the like, but what do we know about this?
Right. Yeah. It's funny. I've been involved in a lot of things where it's like we build it and, a lot of the desires of the product owner, end up becoming visible because we typically will add some sort of metrics or just data collection that no one had before. And
Yeah.
it's like, oh, we could have learned that this wouldn't be used in like a focus group or something, but now we learned after building it, after hundreds of thousands of dollars and putting it out there. So I've certainly seen that sort of thing happen before.
Yeah.
And so yeah, data collection and exploration of those ideas, those are all really important things.
Yeah. Yeah. And you'll see with these behaviors that they're not mutually exclusive. There's a lot of crossover. So we're talking about making the work visible, but we're also talking about aspects of validate before, during, and after.
Right.
And they intentionally have a crossover between them. I'd still be in a corner racking my brain if I tried to make them all mutually exclusive. And what I want them to be is beneficial to organizations.
Nice, nice. Yeah. And I think so making the work visible. I'm trying to see, you mentioned Agile early on, and one of the Agile values or principles I'm trying to remember is working software over, is it documentation? I think.
Comprehensive documentation. Yeah.
Yes. So one thing I have so I've been on teams, we're making things visible at kind of like a scale bigger than the team was quite beneficial because it kind of exposed patterns happening and that kind of thing. But I've also been on teams where basically what the team delivers every day is making visible the work, right? If
Fair.
you're like working in a continuous delivery fashion,
Yeah.
The amount of sophistication in whatever tool you're using to make the work visible needed to be very low, just because it was just kind of like, oh, you want to know what we did? Download the latest release, go. You know what I mean? Or go to the
right.
go to the just refresh the page, right? So I suppose, how do you know how much visibility is needed in a certain context, I suppose?
I don't know. That's a great question. I mean, I can, what's a heuristic for that? How much visibility do we actually need? I mean, I guess some of it is getting a sense for how often are we asked things that this would reveal, how often are we interrupted? How much do we actually know about, what's upcoming and what's going on? Like part of making the work visible actually helps us know what's the next problem that we're going to solve, right? We have a sense of what we're kind of what we're focused on. Man, I just had a thought, and I feel like it was brilliant, and I lost it. That was around this as well. So you mentioned kind of like reporting up and all of that, and one of the things that I really try to encourage teams with, like, yeah, you want to make all this visible, right? And you do want to do some tracking, you do want to have analytics, but as much as possible, find ways to reduce the friction to gathering this data. As much as you can, make doing the work update the progress, right? And that can be simple things like, hey, name your branch with the ticket number of your tracking system. And there's a lot of tools where you can, like, basically I can get branch, tracking number, and then a description, right? And now my tracking system can monitor that and keep it updated. So I've reduced the friction. I've made it super easy for me to do that, and find ways to do that where doing the work moves the status. Don't make moving status additional work. And that that'll give you're going to get much better, like, real data, right? And you're not now causing friction in the work. You're not actually slowing work down in order to monitor it.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it feels really familiar to a script that I recently wrote.
I feel like this is the last thing you just said is Chris has put a lot of time and energy into making super easy for us. Yeah, I'll probably kick it over to Chris here, just because I feel like ever since I started working with him, just doing good work will make visibility higher for whoever needs to know it.
Yep.
I feel like there's Chris
Yeah, well, there was
scripts
the
prevalently in every system I've ever seen at our organization.
it well, so this is a little bit of the, like, favoring automation, but one thing that you just said, Doc, about the idea of moving status should be as low friction as possible. So one of the most recent things I did was having the OpenAI APIs read our Git history to do the status reports. So teams, ensembles used to spend, 15 minutes to, like, an hour, depending on the complexity of summarizing for high level leadership what was done. And now that's all automated. And so, and I didn't, when I kind of embarked on this experiment, I didn't realize how much friction was in the reporting. And so it's given us the opportunity to reclaim just tons and tons of time. And so, but yeah, there's typically, like, even if people want Gantt charts, I made a open source project called Gherkin to Gantt, which takes Gherkin scenarios and now Jasmine and everything else. It converts all of those to Gantt charts. So it'll Gantt it looks at your repo, looks how far back the test went in since the last test, and then Gantts that as, like, the time to the next feature. So you would see, like, a nice little Gantt chart of up and to the right, and things like that. So it's just a fun little thing, but making that stuff surface and being frictionless for the team, I think, is good, and some level of scripting helps.
Yeah. So that really, like, you're really leaning into the favor automation over documentation. That's right. Really, that is to a great extent the essence of what that particular behavior is about. Is look, there's a ton of stuff. Like, if you got something that needs to be done repeatedly, and your inclination is, all right, let's document this so that it doesn't get messed up. Can you automate it? I bet you can. If you can get humans to do it over and over again, you can probably get a machine to do it over and over again. Right. And I recognize that's not always true, but it's a lot more often true than we maybe give it a try. And I find a lot of times, and I see this more and more. Orgs have now, and there's a ton of different names for them, but basically their DevOps engineer, or their engineering enablement engineer, or their whatever. And oftentimes it's kind of incumbent upon those folks to, like, talk to developers and go, all right, what hurts? All right, let me see if I can automate that away for you. Right. And it's super beneficial. reduce the friction, make it that much easier to focus on the business problem and focus on, good composition, good delivery.
Nice. Yeah. It's funny. It's been fun watching Chris on this favorite automation over documentation quest over 6 years now. And what was, I think he nailed a lot of it really quickly. But then there's been the one he just mentioned,
Yeah.
that stuck around for a while just because it was difficult to automate. But even remember, Chris, sitting in a big Agile conference room in one of your sessions, and I brought it up to the group as like, how do we solve this problem? And it got solved. So yeah, congrats, Chris.
Yeah.
Nice. Cool. Well, yeah, I love a lot what you're sharing. And kind of keying back into what I've been following your content for a while, Doc, and really enjoying it. And then people will often say things like work together, or let's be a team. You can imagine the classic posters on the wall of corporations since the 70s, right? And so, but it was recently I saw that you mentioned specifically that work together may involve or does involve things like pairing or ensembling. And so that really caught my eye. And so, so I'm curious on what work together means to you, and if it's changed over the years. How has it changed?
It's interesting. I don't know if it has changed. And I feel like it's almost like it's come in a lot of ways for me, almost like a full circle, right? So,
okay.
So really early days, for me, really early days, let's talk the like 1980s, right? We didn't have all these roles. We didn't have these people that specialized in this and this, and like you had the team that did the stuff. You had a designer and you had a product manager or project manager, and that was it. And oftentimes you didn't have a designer, and then you had the customer. And we would sit with our internal customers, and we'd talk about what is the problem that they're trying to solve, and we would come up with solutions, and we would build those out, right? And then over time it was like, oh, no, there's a product owner that owns that piece. Oh, there's also a product manager that owns this other piece of it, and then there's the scrum master, and then there's the designer, and there's the developer. And by the way, the developers are either back end or front end, or and like all this specialization. And a lot of that specialization ended up, in my opinion, splitting aspects of the work off into different silos. And so it was interesting for me to watch over the years as the world seemed to be simultaneously leaning into agility and creating further and further separation of roles and responsibilities, and creating these micro silos all over the damn place. And so for me, the very long lead in, sorry.
No, it's great.
Work together is like, let's get back to the way that it was. I honestly think, and I recognize not the whole team can sit in every meeting, but I'm going to look at one of the last organizations that I did some work with. It took a while, but we ended up where we had tech folks and product folks that were in sales meetings once the sales discussions had gotten to a certain point, right? And it allowed for a much more rich and valid conversation about what can we do for you specifically. And we really leaned into ensemble. In fact, that was the default. And then pairing was kind of a fallback. And then solo work was basically like, all right, so you're spiking something then, huh? Because we're going to throw it away. There wasn't individual contribution. And of course there's exceptions, but they were few and far between.
Right.
And involving if it's an internal customer, involving the internal customer, product owner, and tech lead all in your story mapping session. Don't have product go off and do story mapping and then bring it to the team, right? Have everyone involved. So it's actually, I'm looking at, as I see organizations lean into, all right, this person in this role is responsible for this thing, and then this person in this role is responsible for this thing. I'm really trying to encourage, hey, the team needs to accomplish certain things. Let's worry a little bit less about titles and roles and a little more about, are we as a collective getting this shit done?
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, it's I think that my lean foo is failing me and exactly where I remember hearing it, but that goes back to lean in many ways, right? Because often, maybe as a story, not software related, but one of the first things a lean consultant did for an organization was, hey, you have 100 roles, let's make it 5. And then all of a sudden a bunch of waste went away, right?
Yeah.
And in some environments that's easier than others if you have unions or laws or these kinds of things. But I've seen the same a lot, whether it's working on software or baseball coaching together or watching my wife and kids be involved in musical theater. If the specialization reaches a certain degree, it's almost like you can see quote unquote code reviews and async, and all these queues building up, and it's just like it almost sometimes they go one for one, and so yeah, and I feel like now I'm hypersensitive to it, like even when Chris talks about like, oh, this team is working on this thing, and I'm like, don't over specialize them. Like it's just like these warnings go off in my head on specialization. But what? Yeah. So I really was enamored by what you said. The industry leaning both into agile and a hyper role specialization. I would love to know how that came about, because in one sense it feels like they oppose each other, right? Yeah.
I feel like they do. I feel like some of that just came out of the certificate mill, right?
Oh.
The finances influence the structure, right?
Yeah. I would love to know how, like, and it's just my observation, right? I don't have survey studies that really prove that this is the case. What I have is, over the last 20 years, most of my gigs are for a year to 3 years, and then I switch to another company, and I'm seeing these patterns. And I'm working with startups, I'm working with Fortune 100, and I'm working with companies that are in between. And it just seems like this has been happening, and it seems like it's been happening, more lately. And I'm not sure why. Yeah.
I think I think you're exactly right. I think the certification mill is definitely a thing. I also, it's really interesting because, I've seen DevOps engineers kind of go, in and out of our environment. And one story always kind of gets me, which is like, we had a DevOps engineer kind of leave and then go to another company, and they had this experience where they couldn't get anything done because they were in the specialist silo, and all of a sudden they couldn't, get anything done. And like in our environment, they would work on code from time to time, even for the product. But the idea of specialized roles within our group is that you spend your learning time learning more about that specialization, but you do all of the work together all the time.
Yeah.
And so what they experienced at other companies was just this like, ultra siloing, and so, their feedback was, I can't do true DevOps because the software team, won't get to a certain level of testing, and I can't influence that. Yep. Meanwhile, being over here, it's like we can do these things and do all of them. And so even though I'm spending more time waiting to do the thing that I'm passionate about, to be that specialist, I can get more of that. I can get farther down the chain of productivity in that specialization because I have all of the support and I've taken everyone along with me. And so, I don't necessarily think that the specialization is necessarily a bad thing, but the siloing that comes from specializing roles and being like, that's the DevOps group now, and they've become an ops group again, and it's still throwing things over the fence again, and it just seems to happen over and over again. So,
yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally
I'm
agree.
totally, I'm with you. That's exactly correct. It's not so much the specialization is bad, although I do tend more towards what you kind of described, which is a team of, I will say, generalists with individuals that have particular strengths, right?
Right.
So, if I go someplace and they're like, "Hey, we have back end engineers and front end engineers," I will, okay, let's stop that
Yeah.
right now. Engineers, you happen to have strength in Java messaging, that type of stuff. You happen to have strength in JavaScript and the things that are related to that. But let's not continue this specialization to the point
Yeah.
where, like, you're not allowed to work on the back end stuff because of your title. I don't understand. And a lot of what you're talking about is actually a side effect of working together. The fact that you, like, how did you get that influence? It's not positional authority,
Yeah.
right? It's credibility that you've built, and it is trust that you have built by working with and interacting with these people. And they see that you genuinely have their best interest in mind. And so it enables you to do these things and to influence, versus I'm over here in this specialized siloed role that is actually separate from your delivery team. And now anything I do that I think is on your behalf, one, I might have missed the mark. Two, implementing it is always a disruption to you, which you're probably going to resist, even if once it's in place, it would be better for you. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. And yeah, I've definitely seen that. Yeah, Chris will often mention the center, enter, turn kind of thing. But if you're not working together with someone, it is seen as a outside, influence, maybe untrusted, right?
Yeah.
And so, where as opposed to it coming from, oh yeah, I know Doc, and he's got some weird ideas, but he's a good guy. I enjoy working with him. He's smart on these things. I'll try it out.
Right.
Kind of thing. And so that, yeah, working together, they often builds that right away. I had a follow-up question maybe before moving to another principle.
Mm-hmm.
I'm basically trying to thwart Chris's promise to our audience that we were going to hit all, what is it, 10 or something by the end of the episode. But something that I've seen come up quite often, and I don't know if this is always the case, but I've seen it before, where someone in leadership correctly identifies a problem. Let's just say it's DevOps or whatever, right? Let's say it's backend, right? And it seems like it's a very clear solution to the problem that you can trace in your HR org chart and in your payment stubs, that I've solved this problem because I've hired person for role A for that problem. So I think I've seen that perspective, and I kind of get why they've gotten there, because I've been on good teams where someone will say collectively this team is responsible for A, and then the team will step up, make sure it gets done. Maybe someone leads it, maybe it's an equal contribution from several different people. I've also seen cases where hey, the team is responsible for A, and this is really important, and then nothing happens about A. And so I guess I could see why someone in leadership would be tempted to be like, well, if no one's going to do anything about A, I'm going to hire someone specifically to do A, whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You got any thoughts on that kind of scenario?
Well, so I think that's an accountability thing, right? And I do, like, as much as I'm a yes, work together, I do recognize that it is important that some people have responsibility for certain aspects of the team's behavior, right? So I typically there's typically someone who's in a lead role, has a little more responsibility over, let's make sure that we actually get these things done and we do them in the right way, but everyone should be. So what I mean by an accountability thing is whether it's an individual or it's a team, right? If you as a person in positional authority or whatever else it might be, if I were to say to Chris, hey, Chris, I want you to take care of X, Y, Z. And then for the next 2 months, I asked Chris all about A, all about B, and all about C, but I never ask about X, Y, or Z. And then at the end of the quarter, I go, Chris, you didn't get that done. Well, like, a lot of cases, that's what's going on, whether it's a team or it's an individual. It is that we tell people that they have a responsibility to do something. And then when we communicate with them, we tell them what we actually want them to do. And I think we lose the right to be frustrated over the fact that they didn't get this other thing done. And I think a lot of folks in leadership need to recognize that behavior. In a simpler way, not about getting stuff done, but how many organizations, how many leaders, how many whatever have I seen where, hey, we're all about work-life balance, and we have 3 weeks per year of mandatory vacation, and we care about you as an individual. You're a part of our family. You really matter, and balance really matters. Also, let's all give a round warm of applause to Austin for staying up 3 nights in a row over the weekend and just jamming that out. I know you missed the kids' baseball game, but you know what? You really came through for us. Thanks a lot, buddy. Like, wait, which one do you actually mean?
Yeah. It's really funny, but I've been there when it's been crushing. Yeah, when I've seen people crushed by that. Yeah, that's a real thing. I'll throw out one more thing, maybe before we switch topics, is kind of going back to your other principles. I'm almost like, paid by you to mention some of these principles now. I feel like, yeah, but it actually came to mind. Make the work visible can help with the accountability or responsibility problem you're talking about. And this is something I've seen Chris do at the leadership level quite a bit, is if something is unaddressed, just drawing attention to it and making it more and more and more and more visible. And how very quickly someone's like, okay, I'm going to do something about that, or a team will stand up and address it. But
yeah, well, and you know what, that's true. When it's more visible, like, I have more clarity as to why XYZ actually didn't get done. I'm watching as A and B and C are being prioritized above it. And I can look at that and go, oh, those are the right trade-offs. But if that's obfuscated from me, if that's opaque, if I can't really see that trade-off happening, then, I'm more likely to be frustrated about the fact that XYZ is not happening. So yeah, you're right. Making it visible helps with those conversations. A lot of times it forces us to have real trade-off conversations. Oh yeah. You can't actually work on all 27 of those things at once, can you?
Exactly.
And I a lot of times with leaders, when that kind of a scenario happens, I will press upon them, you need to make these priority decisions. And when they come back and they say, well, these are all our top priority, I will say, look, here's the reality of the situation. All you're doing is you're asking that junior developer to make the decision on your behalf, because they can only do one thing at a time, legitimately. Mm-hmm. And if you can't tell them what it is, they'll decide for you. And that's on you, but you basically abdicated your authority, your responsibility to that individual.
Nice. Well, on that, since you mentioned that, the one thing at a time, simple things in small steps. Yeah. What was your discovery process there on that one?
Oh man. So simple things in small steps. This one, it took me a while to really kind of nail down, how do I want to articulate this? Because one of the things I talk about is experimentation. And that was sort of what I was leaning into, but I realized, like, no, there's more to it than just, experiments. I think it's super important for us to really take small increments towards solutions, even when we know exactly what the solution's supposed to be, because there's always something to learn along the way, and it can help us to make trade-off decisions. It can allow us to pivot. So let me see if I can give a realistic example. So doing work with Ford Motor Company, right? And this is, we've talked about this publicly, Ford sanctioned conversation. So I feel okay with it. One of the things that we were looking to do at the time was, this was years ago, it was pre-COVID, but we wanted to reduce the lead time for stock vehicles from 90 days to 30 days. And we recognized that one of the things we needed to do was we needed to change the order entry system, not just change it, we were going to rewrite it. And we, what was important to them was high volume vehicles, but high volume vehicles are also super complex. And so we got them to agree that we were going to start with this really super simple vehicle. It was basically just this one model with no options, with no constraints. Constraints basically being something in the flow of creating that vehicle that limits the capacity. It might be union labor, it might be parts, it might be raw materials, whatever, right? But there's constraints on vehicles. So we just started with the simplest thing we possibly could. And then we wrote the absolutely simplest order entry system that we could come up with, and launched it to a couple of dealers. And we learned a ton. We learned how they think about order entry. We learned about some of the security requirements that we didn't know were actually there. It gave us more time to learn about some of the constraints and complexities. So by creating this in small steps, we were able to keep moving and validate along the way that we were on the right path, and learn as we went. And then we actually got to a point where, like, all right, these 3 or 4 models are now completely done and ready to go. Let's put this project on pause for a handful of months while we go solve some other problem, and then we can come back to this. They were okay with their F-150 and the Mustang not being on this order entry system yet. They were getting benefit from it. So the simple things in small steps allowed us to learn, to pivot. So
nice. Yeah. What comes to mind for me is, I guess in a small way, in a coding example, is even when I think I know exactly what to do.
Yep.
And it's like, say it's a big chunk of code or a big chunk of a problem. And then I do the big thing without working in small steps. And then I realize it doesn't work. Now I don't know what's broken in it.
Yep.
Was it the 5th thing I created? Was it the integration with the other thing? And that's a much more stressful problem.
Yes, definitely. And so the simple things and small steps actually pairs very well with the next behavior, which is be meticulous about composition, right? And the two kind of, they kind of come together, and even the validates for those two to think about test first. But yes, I agree. So simple things and small steps also has to do with how we're actually coding them. You're absolutely correct. Like, what's the simplest thing that you could possibly do? And then you can refactor later, right? It's okay that you have three else's in that if statement right now, but hey, that 4th one's probably the time for us to get that out of there. So sure, that eventually that's going to be some kind of map, or it's going to be something against the lookup table or whatever, but right now it doesn't need to be. So let's just do this simple thing, because it may turn out that, like, we got a certain way down the road on this solution, and no one's using it, or they're using it in ways we didn't expect. So we actually never needed to build the thing that you knew for certain was going to have to happen, because we've now pivoted on this concept. Yeah.
I dig it. Well, cool. Well, we are getting kind of near the end of our time box. And to be honest, we hit more of your principles than I expected. At least touched on them.
We did, yeah.
We only got halfway, guys. I don't know. I think
all right. Yes. You're just being the Yeah, the Dilbert cartoon manager over
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
Yeah. Hit the estimate. I got you, Chris.
I was promised 8 topics. No, I'm just kidding.
I was actually only thinking we are gonna hit 1 or 2 or 3, but this is great. But yeah, is there anything you want to share or plug before we close out at least this first installment of this conversation, Doc?
No, I guess, yeah. So if anything, this is kind of my new area of focus for the foreseeable future. My intention is to write a book on this. And the way that I'm going to do that is I am going to continue to generate a ton of content that's related to this, and then I'm going to pare it down into a book. So, if this conversation was interesting, you can, my blog is docondev.com. I've also got docondev.substack.com, where I'm releasing more content. So we can continue the conversation there until I come back and we finish I honestly think we only skipped 3 of them. I think we got 5 out of the 8.
We did talk a little bit about automation. That's true.
We
But
did.
I had so much more to say. So.
I know.
Nice. All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Doc. And I'm looking forward to your book writing process. And I'm guessing your principles will help with your book writing process. It's a very meta thing there. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. I'm making the work visible. That's been hard to do.
Nice. Right on. Well, thanks for joining us. It's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot. And to our audience, please like and subscribe. Please share this with someone who you also will think will enjoy the conversation. And these conversations are intended to invite conversation. So, please join in on the conversation, whether that's asynchronously on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, and more, or reach out to us in other ways. We're looking forward to learning from you all. And until next time, ensemble on and have a good one and work together, everybody. See ya. Bye.
Bye, everyone.